20 years have passed since the release of Conker's Bad Fur Day, and there hasn't been a game like it since. From the opening cutscene, you can tell this is not going to be your ordinary rare collectathon, and that's something this game takes pride in. Disarming is probably the word that best describes the experience of Conker's Bad Fur Day, and unless you've been exposed to the entire game before your first playthrough, you are bound to find something that shocks you, disgusts you, makes you laugh, or a combination of all three. It's a game that is as unique as they come, combining the vibrant and colorful aesthetic rare games of the N64 era were known for, with a raunchy M-rated sense of humor. Conker's Bad Fur Day is a game that knows what its identity is, and rather than shying away from it, leans into its over-the-top nature to create something truly memorable. It's an experience that perfectly captures the time it was released in, and a one-of-a-kind game that we'll likely never see again. Undoubtedly, the defining aspect of Conker's Bad Fur Day is its humor. While certain jokes have not aged well over these last 20 years, the majority of the gags still hold up today. I think a big reason why Conker's Bad Fur Day has stayed consistently funny is because it doesn't rely on just one type of comedy to make you laugh, but instead uses a wide variety of styles to crack the player. Conker's utilizes exaggerated physical comedy, dry witty banter, shock humor, toilet humor, pop culture parodies, and more. It feels like one bit leads right into the next, with the gameplay section simply serving as vehicles to get you to your next gut-busting cutscene. Everything in this game is ridiculous, from the fourth wall breaking tutorial sections to the absurd boss fights you must complete each chapter. From the beginning of the game, you are constantly finding yourself in wacky situations, whether it be a gargoyle explaining how a piece of gothic architecture can really get up your ass after 200 years, or completely annihilating some wasps with the help of Mrs. B and her machine gun turret. As a result, the outrageous tone of the game is set early on, and from there we only see the craziness ramp up. Take for example the chapter Windy, where the entire area focuses on Conker creating a giant ball of poo. As insane and objective as that is for a Nintendo game, the method in which you obtain that poo is even more mad. You are immediately dumped, no pun intended, into a foul tower with literal shit pouring down the walls. Once you climb Shit Tower, you then must release a cow from her holding cell and convince her to drink disgusting prune juice you've just poured into a trough. Your method of convincing her is also less convincing and more just ramming a bull's horns directly into her body while she eats grass, which evidently makes her thirsty. Once she's ingested a bit of the prune juice, immediately the cow runs to the center of the area you're in and begins shitting uncontrollably into a hole in the ground. Conker then rams the bowl into the cow again, murdering it and exploding it into many pieces, before repeating the process twice more. You then must return to the dung beetle who tasked you with collecting the poo by swimming through disgusting liquid shit before finally being rewarded with your very own poo ball. If you aren't grossed out, amused, or even a little intrigued at the thought of this preposterous mission, then Conker's Bad Fur Day likely isn't going to be a game for you. Considering this chapter is one of the first available in the game, it really only gets crazier from here. Most famously, you'll actually fight against a giant piece of shit, literally, named the Great Mighty Poo. He will serenade you during your fight with an extremely memorable sing-along tune as you try to destroy his beautiful clagginess by throwing rolls of toilet paper into his mouth and ultimately flushing him away. But on top of that, in later chapters you will solve puzzles by getting drunk and urinating on rock monsters, you'll defeat a boiler boss by smashing its brass testicles with a pair of bricks, and you'll even bite chunks out of a giant caveman's ass with a raptor's help. By infusing the game's humor into the core of every level, Conker's Bad Fur Day produces some of the most diverse and unconventional missions found in gaming. How many games have you dropping villagers into a grinder as a Bat 1 level, and then have you go to war killing teddy bears with a tank on the beaches of Normandy in the next? How many games have you blasting zombies' heads off with a shotgun given to you by the Grim Reaper himself in one section of the game, only to turn around and pit you against a xenomorph in space in another? And is there any other game on the N64, or any other console for that matter, that has lava surfing races against cavemen, worm-crushing barrel rides, fights against and with a pitchfork, prehistoric dinosaur sacrifices, and gladiator-style arena combat on the back of a raptor? My guess is probably not. Conker's Bad Fur Day just has a knack for pulling off things that likely wouldn't work in any other game. Despite the game being fairly short and also somewhat linear, it never suffers because you're constantly getting new gameplay mechanics that keep Conker's Bad Fur Day from getting dull. Granted, a lot of these mechanics are tied up in the context-sensitive buttons placed throughout the world and aren't abilities you'll have access to throughout your journey, it doesn't hurt the game because of the way they are introduced. The self-aware humor of the game allows for this feature to be cleverly implemented that would likely be called lazy design in another title, but ultimately allows for the many ideas I've mentioned before to be included. It's why Conker is able to use throwing knives, swim underwater, get sober in the blink of an eye, set things on fire with a flamethrower, ride a bull, operate a turret, turn into an anvil, fire a slingshot, get pissed drunk, blast things with a bazooka, access his manual, destroy things with TNT, and a variety of other actions. Perhaps what I enjoy about these context-sensitive abilities the most is how they complement the many parodies featured in Conker's Bad Fur Day. The most obvious example is the Matrix parody towards the end of the game's heist chapter. Robbing the Federal Reserve Bank would have been satisfying enough just for the Matrix-like cutscenes, but instead you get to channel your inner Neo and slow down time as you pick off the bank's weasel guards. Another great example is during the final boss, where in addition to using your suit to beat up Heinrich, you must grab, swing, and toss this final boss like you do to Bowser in Super Mario 64. But even without the complement of the context-sensitive abilities, the pop culture references in Conker's Bad Fur Day would still stand out as one of the major reasons this game is so unique. Whether obvious like the Jaws scene at the end of the Bat's Tower chapter, or subtle like the caveman hat Conker dons that is thought to be a nod to Rare's Saberwolf character, parodies and Easter eggs dominate this game. In fact, many of the major characters, like Haybot or Count Batula, are completely ripped from a famous book, movie, or show. These references are a big part of the identity of Conker's Bad Fur Day because while games like the ones in the GTA franchise are also big on their parodies, their foundation isn't rooted in them as deeply as Conker's is. And while it may sound unoriginal to make your game's core based on so many pre-existing works, Conker's excellent timing and delivery once again allows for these references to be tastefully executed in satisfyingly memorable ways. However, what takes Conker from being just a funny niche game to an underrated one-of-a-kind classic is its multiplayer modes. While I'll be the first to admit that they haven't aged extremely well, there's enough variety here that it makes me wonder why some of these ideas haven't been tried again in other games. My favorite of these modes is the Heist mode, which was inexplicably taken out of the Live and Reloaded remake for the original Xbox. Instead of your traditional deathmatch, which Conker's has several variations of, you instead are tasked with retrieving a money bag at the center of a bank, which then must be brought to your own personal safe. This is quintessential 4-player N64 action, as there is so much going on with 4 different teams running around at once. Additionally, Beach is a fun mode where one side playing as the villagers must race across the map with no weapons while trying to avoid being mowed down by the evil teddies. Playing as the villagers requires you to be crafty and think carefully about your movements, while playing as the teddies is a fun little tower defense-esque minigame. In total, there are 8 different game types to choose from in multiplayer, ranging from traditional team versus team combat to racing over lava on surfboards. I've always thought that due to low sales, the release at the end of the N64's lifespan, and the lack of popularity generated by the Xbox remake, that Conker's Bad Fur Day gets overlooked when discussing great multiplayer games. I've always wondered how this game's reputation would have been changed had this title taken off on Xbox Live, and while it likely would have still been dwarfed by Halo, I can't help but think it may still have carved out its own little dedicated community. In 2021, a community may still be possible through the advancements of online emulated play, but for me, the lost potential will always be one of my greatest what-ifs in gaming. In the end, Conker's Bad Fur Day excels at almost everything it presents to the player. From its varied gameplay, to its underrated multiplayer, all the way to its legendary humor, there's very little that fails to deliver. I mean, even the game's cheats are hilarious and rewarding, allowing you to use your favorite characters from the story in multiplayer, or change the game's difficulty among other things. For a game that was originally supposed to be Rare's answer for Super Mario 64, Conker's Bad Fur Day as we know it was definitely not the original plan. But as in life, oftentimes the events that are unplanned wind up being the best things that can happen, and despite a few rough edges here or there, I'm glad we got the Conker's Bad Fur Day that we did. It's still a game that's hard to believe until you see it, and a true one-of-a-kind experience even 20 years later.